America is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, hunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read. The greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
How can I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies, or raise my children to believe they're equal in its eyes? My leaders are assassinated for speaking their mind. So justice never tilts my way. I thought that she was blind. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
Good day. I am Denise DePina Reed, co-host of At the Round Table with Mamleo, a Massachusetts Association Minority Law Enforcement Officers Incorporated broadcast. And we greatly appreciate our sponsors, John B. Cruz Construction Company, 1 John Elliott Square, Roxbury, Massachusetts, third-generation family-owned, founded in 1948, to provide superior customer service and a quality product for its clients and tenants. Everyone's going green, and you should too. That's the law offices of Donald E. Green, located in the heart of Roxbury at 2235 Washington Street in Dudley Square, soon to be called Nubian Square. 617-442-0050, and also 500 North Main Street, Unit B, Randolph, Massachusetts, 02386. Last but not least, our newest sponsor, Residential Mortgages Services, will guide you home. 91 Franklin Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02110. Contact Senior Loan Officer Cora Holbrook at 781-664-6200. That's Cora.Holbrook at rmsmortgage.com. Without their sponsorship, this broadcast would not be possible. Thank you and have a great day.
Well, we're back. Good morning. This is WBPG LP 102.9 at the Round Table with Mamleo. It is Saturday, April 27th. I am your host, Denise DePina Reed, with my co-host, Dr. Willie Bradley, and our guest, Judith Foster and Chief. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think your mic need to be turned on there right quick, sister.
Yeah,
You make sure you have the button on. Slide it up. It sounds like it is now.
Okay.
All right. Before we get started, again, we're listening to At the Round Table here on Boston Praise Radio and TV. If you want to see it at the table, there's a couple of ways that you can get it. First, you need to call one of these three numbers, 617-282-0685 or 617-282-7794 or 617-265-2679. Or if you decide that you do not want your voice over the radio, but you want to provide your thoughts, you can do it a couple of ways. Go to Facebook. We're streaming to you live on Facebook as well as on BostonPraiseRadio.tv. Put your comments in the chat and we will put it over the air. So, welcome. We're in our second hour. I can't believe an hour went by so quickly.
I know, and I didn't get a chance. I mean, we were going so hard and so fast.
Yeah.
I usually let them know that, we're getting ready to go to break and we'll be back. But I mean, I looked over and the time was like, oh my God, I got to shut this thing off.
Well, in addition to that, when we got into the discussion around Howard University, and the next thing you know, we had another 15 minutes before before the hour was over with. So it was really quick. But we have some very important folks here today on our second hour. So we're going to get into the discussion. I'm going to shut my mouth for a while so I can listen. And then hopefully I have some comments.
Okay. Good morning. Would you like to tell our guest a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into our discussion about marijuana and things that are happening?
Sure. I'm Judith Foster. As you know, I used to broadcast from this studio, from the reality broadcast, and with Chief from Mattapan. And I'm also the founder and president of Hero Nurturing Center. It's a nonprofit organization. We use nature as a healing conduit. And when I leave here, I have a program over at the Nature Center that I have to get to.
Oh, good.
So thank you guys for having me, and for also having this discussion. I'm also a board member, former board member, full disclosure. I just handed in my resignation to MassCan. And I'm also celebrating the Freedom Rally. That's why I'm wearing their shirt today. And I still support the organization. And
is that the 19th annual Mass?
It was the 29th last year.
We're on 30.
We're on the 30th year this year.
Okay. Great. And Chief?
Hey, so good morning.
Good morning,
This is
sir.
fantastic to be here. And I miss being here from the reality. We used to do the reality here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm putting a face with the name that we get your comments all the time. Like, who's this guy, Chief? You know what I mean?
Thanks for welcoming me to the round table. It's one of the best shows in Boston on the weekend. Really connecting the communities,
Absolutely.
bringing all kinds of folks together. A real platform for the upliftment of people locally. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for
We
that.
definitely appreciate those kind words, because we don't get paid for this, brother. This is something that we do because we feel that our people have to be educated, and it's a very unique situation. People don't understand that Denise and I are both former retired Boston police officers, and as you know, our past president, who was just on the phone with us, Larry Ellison, is an active Boston police officer.
Yes.
So I would challenge anyone who's listening to go anywhere around the country and see if you can find a radio show that's hosted by former and active police officers about policing and other issues in our country.
And
So
And if
I
I-
want to say that's a sacrifice, though.
Yeah, it
Yes.
It's really putting yourself out there.
It is.
It's totally unnecessary, and it's asking a lot.
Yeah.
But the folks that step up to that, we want to make sure that we acknowledge that. and support
Absolutely,
that.
and we've always supported you guys. And not only are you active and retired officers, you're black.
Well,
Yes, so
yes.
that makes a difference.
Well.
And you put your neck out there just by wearing the uniform. But then you do it doubly by speaking about being
Yes.
in the
Right,
uniform.
and this role is so important right now when we're struggling with relationships with PD all across the country. I mean, we need more voices like this that
Absolutely.
are thoughtful and that are really welcoming,
Yes.
and that can really help move communities through some of these issues healthily.
So kudos to you guys.
Well, we appreciate that. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. You know, I was, and this is, I don't mean to digress here, but I think this is relevant. I was actually watching this piece on Instagram involving police officers out of, I want to say, Georgia, and where they approach a black man. And his wife, who was eating pancakes
Yes.
at IHOP.
Yes.
And the black man ended up getting arrested. And I'm sitting there as a former police officer saying to myself, it's all in the approach. What officers got to understand is that men of color, in particular black men, has an issue with being disrespected, and that stems from racism, by the way, from slavery. It stems from slavery. So when you come in with that attitude, what tends to happen is that you get rebuffed real quickly, and it become very combative. And so having this type of platform where you can share that information with people, you're probably saving lives and not even know it.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
Don't
Dr. Bradley.
Being able to explain what is actually in the mind of police, because we don't really know, right?
Yeah.
It's only what we think. And so really doing that, I think, too, and being able to help us think through that is tremendous.
And also putting a comfortable narrative, if you will, and a face on the the authority in the neighborhood is a great thing.
You know,
So thank you again.
Yeah, so we need to educate our people.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, I don't want to get digressed, but that's it, because what we're going into is, and I'm assuming this, and forgive me if this assumption is wrong, is the marijuana, legalizing marijuana, and our people pretty much was victimized through the mass incarceration effort, the social policy that they have had.
Yes.
Or I should say regulatory policy that they have had over the years. So now that it's legalized, us people of color should be able to benefit from it as well. That's where I think we're going.
You would think so, Dr. Bradley, but that's not the case. And if I may, that's a pet peeve of mine right now. And there's two things. One, I'd like to address. I do believe that if folks had spoken to people who are actually on the ground, suffering from this, and also if they had done their homework to know what the underlying contention was and the birthing of this law in the first place, So I think they should have started there, doing the homework and the research to know where the law stemmed from in the first place, that it was racist. It was admittedly a racist set of policies intended to harm the said community that it is harming still today under legalization. And so I think that if they had done that, the powers that be, no matter what state this is occurring in, I believe the policies would have shaped differently. In that, we would have allowed for folks who are incarcerated, those are the most harmed right now, I feel, not the people who went and are released now, but let's talk about the people who are still suffering because of those unjust laws. And I think that's where we should have started. If we meant to erase or repair the harm that was already done. And I'd let Chief come in.
So I think when we start looking at this issue like I did, and when I became a medical cannabis patient, because medicinal cannabis really helped me. When I became one, I started really doing a lot of research. And when I do that, I start with the history. Where are we coming from? Where are we beginning with cannabis prohibition? And when you go to the very beginning, and you know, I'm a student of African American studies, American history. I love it all. When you go to the beginning of cannabis prohibition, you find a very, very ugly scene where in the 1930s, people of color, black people here in America, just had no political power. You're talking about the peak time period for lynching. You're talking about Birth of a Nation is 1915, sweeping through the country, informing a whole new generation of white male leaders. These folks go on to create what we know of as the beginning of cannabis prohibition, 1937, Harry Anslinger, basically coming after alcohol prohibition had failed. They still had a large apparatus, and they just said, hey, let's go after these colored folks with this thing. We can call it marijuana. It's actually cannabis that all of our farmers know, and it's in all of our medical cabinets. But we can criminalize this thing, and we can criminalize these people, and we can be dishonest, and we can make money out of it. And so anyone who goes and looks at the history of cannabis prohibition will very quickly find there's no scientific basis for it. It was all dishonesty and racism, and that's why you don't hear people defending the history of cannabis prohibition.
They can't do it.
All they do is talk about modern issues and try to maintain status quo in other ways. But you will not find anyone that's prepared to defend the history of cannabis prohibition. Not law enforcement, not anyone.
Well, one of the things that I do as an academic is that I too look at not only the history, but what is the rationale, what is the undercurrent rationale for that history.
Yes.
So if you criminalize, and I do agree with you, I'm very aware of where you're going. But if you criminalize, after you have lost prohibition in alcohol, you criminalize marijuana or cannabis. It is what it is. That's the name of it, cannabis. And you direct that criminalization towards people of color. What you're doing is that you're using your criminal justice system as a virtual plantation so that you can then take the freedoms from those people in the system the way that you took the freedom from the people who are on the plantation. That's really the undercurrent. That was the undercurrent.
Absolutely.
Apparatus underneath that. That's the rationale.
Absolutely.
Right. So you have the Civil War ending at the kind of end of the 1800s. We have all of this Reconstruction and then new Jim Crow, right? And we have this new culture developing down there, and they're really looking at how to re-enslave folks and get back that dynamic. And this is some of the stuff that's coming out of that.
And so with that said, why are we then enabling this unjust law even further? And when I hear black people in our community say, well, you know, they're not for legalization, and they're not speaking up in terms of, fine, you're not for legalization, but at least think about the fact that it's your children, whether they're, you know, tangibly yours, physically yours or not, but if they look like you, they should be your children. They're the ones who are going to prison and wasting away and losing family ties and subject to murder and
it's so violent.
Yes.
It's so violent.
And
totally
so
unnecessarily violent.
We should be the ones who are at the front of the line saying we need to decriminalize this thing all across the board because it started out
really
as an unjust law.
It's a holdover from Jim Crow type of stuff.
So we need to fix
any
this.
small thing can be used to criminalize you, destroy you, lock you up. And, you know, it's really something. When you go back into history even further, you find that women were being criminalized for these types of herbs when they were found on their person.
Called witches.
They would be called consorting with the devil or a witch, and that woman would be destroyed on sight if they felt like it. This is how people are controlled in our society through history. And, you know, culture kind of allows for these things to get away from
We
us.
have a comment.
Yes.
Jean Transvar says, we can't even get an apology for slavery. Of course, this process isn't fair or progressive. In many ways, we're going to have to be very unilateral about our intentions to develop our economy. Now, which was it? Was it called cannabis or was it called marijuana as an herb?
Cannabis is part of the scientific name, and it was the regular name that farmers and others would know this plant by.
Yes.
It was used in medicines and tinctures, and it was grown on farms.
But
in order to criminalize cannabis in the consumers, they adopted a Spanish slang term for cannabis, which was marijuana. It was a scary foreign-sounding word, and it was easier to criminalize it.
And it was also a derogatory term geared towards blacks and Mexicans in particular.
Okay, but down in my part of the country, in Augusta, Georgia, we call it the wildwood weed, but that's another that's another name that we came up with. Wildwood weed.
That's why they didn't know. They said, "Oh, marijuana, what's that?" You know, marijuana sounds dangerous. They didn't know what it was.
You're getting all these comments here. Okay, so Mamleo Boston says, but to this day it remains in that category, and criminalization still disproportionately affects minority groups in the U.S. The ACLU reported that in 2010, black people were 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than white, even though both groups consume marijuana at about the same rate. Some states have taken action to reduce this type of criminalization. 9 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized the recreational use of cannabis, and 29 states allow some form of medical marijuana. San Francisco recently dropped thousands of marijuana-related convictions, and Seattle plans to do the same, but this doesn't change federal restrictions. Grant Smith states, such great points being made. Good book on the subject that explores what Chief was just talking about as to the racist origins of Anslinger's drug war at www.amazon.com. Protectors, Anslinger Federal Narcotics, 1930 to 1962.
Yeah. So the 1930s, you start to see a reaction in America against people, all different types of people. You have laws against Chinese people. Then you start to see these drug laws, which are criminalizing folks. And, you know, so they created the marijuana law in 1937, and it basically created a tax which made it illegal. By 1969, Supreme Court case had been finally pushed its way through with Timothy Leary. They finally declared it unconstitutional, 1969.
Yes.
And then, of course, we know what happens. Richard Nixon comes in 1970, creates the Controlled Substances Act, and automatically recriminalizes marijuana again, admittedly to attack his political opposition. and then just starts this whole new criminalization thing, which later Republicans like Reagan push into overdrive with mass incarceration, and we're still trying to defend all this action years and years later. Here we are, with the same lineage of kind of Republicans trying to rehash this same thing after we've already dealt with this so many times as a country.
And so again, for me, this is just hypocrisy at its highest. Because it's not as if it wasn't admitted that this was unjust and this was just a racist endeavor. So why is it that we, as the sufferers and the victims, have to then plead our case for something that was unjust and should never have been codified?
And we know it's just totally political, right? Because Jimmy Carter in 1977, part of his presidential campaign, anyone can go look it up, he was trying to decriminalize an ounce of weed, 1977.
Yes.
It's just a political thing, never warranted, you know what I mean? And so because Jimmy Carter's administration, frankly, went down the way it did, they don't pick up that stuff anymore for a long time.
Okay, let me ask this question. Because I know the history, and I'm pretty sure a lot of folks are saying, wow, I didn't know that. How do we correct this? What do we do now that we have decriminalized, if you will, and legalized marijuana in Massachusetts for recreational purposes and all other purposes? What do we do as a people, regardless of culture affiliation? What do we do to actually correct this? What do we do to control the flow of this substance in our community so that it becomes it doesn't become what people are predicting, further criminalizing other folks?
I'll defer to Chief.
So, well, I think we have an opportunity, a real valuable opportunity to now heal our relationship with cannabis. We have an opportunity to now go back and learn real stuff about it, the right thing, modern, real stuff. We don't have to be subject to the propaganda anymore. We have an opportunity to change our relationship with cannabis and with the way that we treat each other. And we might all be better for it at the end of the day. I want people to think about cannabis has been medicinal in California for over 20 years. It's been legal medicinal in California for over 20 years. Now, I want you to think about all of the older folks, grandmas, people in your family that may have been able to benefit from the safe consumption of cannabis or medicinal marijuana over these past 20 years while California has seen the wisdom of it. We've been denying people in our state medicine that could potentially be extremely effective to treat their condition, could give them a better quality of life.
Absolutely.
But also, this is what's so important. The side effects are so low that this is one of the things you want to start treating people with. Because we know the side effects are so low, we can't find a way to kill someone with cannabis, basically.
Okay. So,
and if I may say, not only are we missing out on critical medicine, our system itself, our physical bodies, our physiology is geared and made up to effectively interact with cannabis. And so we're denying our bodies and our systems of this critical herb and medicine that we thoroughly need. There are two things. For your mental, it helps you. For your physical, it helps you. And so for your emotional, it also helps you. And so that gives you homeostasis, as Dr. Uma likes to say. But on the other hand, we know from history that cannabis does not kill, does not harm, and does not create havoc amongst our society.
No.
So let me just address this a minute, because why is it so supposedly effective, right?
Right.
Why are people saying it does all of this great? What is behind this thing? Why, right? And so let me just kind of explain what's going on a little bit, all right? And so we're all natural living creatures here on Earth, who have supposedly evolved here through many, many years, interacting with other plants and animals, right? And so we have many different systems in our body that have developed through the many, many different years of evolution. One of these systems that they found is responsive to cannabis, and they call it the endocannabinoid system. That's the cannabinoid system, endo, that's inside you, versus the phytocannabinoid system, which we can find in plants.
Yeah.
And now, so we all know we live in an environment that's not always the most healthy. Perhaps when we were younger as a baby, we had more nutrients and balance and other things. And then as we grow and age and get bad diets, we get a little out of whack. And some of these systems suffer. And so when you introduce something that can provide homeostasis to that system, now you say, wow, well, all this great stuff is happening. Really what was happening was your endocannabinoid system was out of balance. You paid no attention to your endocannabinoid system, and your ability to create endocannabinoids was compromised because of the nasty diet you have, because of your lack of
sunlight,
health and
fresh
sunlight.
air.
Right? You see what I'm saying? And so when we apply cannabinoids to this system and they even it out, people are like, oh my God, this is a miracle drug. No, it's not a miracle drug. You're just making your body come back to a more balanced homeostasis level so it can do what it already wants to do, which is keep you healthy.
And perfect example is an article I posted recently for it was a 95-year-old woman in Jamaica who swore by it. She had no ailments, 95, still cooked her own food, and managed to get around as if she were in her 60s. And so again, there's proof, not anecdotal, there's proof that this thing does not harm, does not kill, does not maim. And so why are we having the resistance that we are having is what I'm saying. Why are we not calling for a complete just kill prohibition?
And we need to be honest too about this healthcare system.
Yes.
I mean, what is Alzheimer's? Does anybody know? Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, cannabis hasn't been part of the conversation. Why? What are these things? Why are people's bodies deteriorating like that? What are some of the ways we can maintain our body in a healthy way? Why are these things kept away from folks? Why are they called so dangerous when they're really not?
Exactly. And again, full disclosure, I had a discussion with Denise the other day, and I was saying that we're so comfortable with having a bottle of wine, a bottle of whiskey, or even, dare I say, a bottle of soda, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, and we hand it to our children readily without even a second thought. And those things, even the Coca-Cola, we won't even go as far as the liquor. Even the bottle of Coca-Cola is more dangerous to your child or yourself, health-wise, than is a joint of cannabis. And so people, I need you all to listen to me and put these things into perspective. The air that you're breathing that's so contaminated, the water that we're drinking filled with fluoride is more detrimental to your health than your next door neighbor smoking a joint and you're smelling it, or your child smelling it. Listen, if your child or you have epilepsy, and there's someone in my family who has epilepsy, and for years I've said to her, because of her church stance, oh no, I want nothing to do with cannabis. Well, you can boil it and drink it if you don't have to smoke it. Oh no, I don't want it, it's against my religion. But yet still, she'd rather suffer with this ailment than try something that has little to no side effects. And this is from brainwashing. We need to stop this. And I think the church, and this is why early when Chief came on as my co-host on The Reality, I wanted us to have this conversation right here at Boston Praise Radio for that specific reason. Because 9 times out of 10, when I've gone to these meetings where cannabis is a discussion to be proliferated in the community, however much so, there's always someone from the religious body saying, no, we don't want this in the community. But then I look at it and I say, well, do you know the harm that's being done to the community? You're perpetuating that same harm by saying that. And so, I'm here today not just to promote cannabis. I'm here to educate as well as to inform, that we've gone down the rabbit hole with this
Yeah.
thing, with the brainwashing. We've bought into the system.
Yeah, I think it's a manifestation of white supremacy in the
Yes,
culture,
and we bought into
look
it.
past it. We don't recognize it as that,
Yes.
and that's why we're unable to really address it properly.
Okay, well,
we got a couple.
Let me ask this question though.
Yes,
I know we
Dr.
got a
Brandon.
question coming up.
No, we got a couple- we got a couple
I'm
of
over
comments.
60. I'm over 60. It's not going to stay long. So let me ask this question: if I were listening to this video, your comments from afar, and I don't have access to you, and I'm thinking, well, how is this leading? Can this lead to gateway drug usage, like
No.
opioid?
I think when
No.
we're not honest
Or
with people,
opioid
and we
overdose condition.
equate cannabis with other things, and we put cannabis into the pockets of people who we criminalize, and onto the shelves of other things that we criminalize, then we make cannabis a criminal thing. Well, then everything associated with cannabis becomes criminal, right?
Yes.
And we create a criminal culture, and we maintain a criminal culture.
But the broad
And so-
answer is no. Alcohol is the gateway drug. If you ask any physician who's worth their salts, and I've worked with many, I'm a medical assistant, not just a radio host, they will tell you alcohol is the gateway drug. Cannabis is not.
Yeah.
Just emphatically no.
Yeah, it is. It actually is the gateway drug, right? Most people start with a drink before just about anything.
Absolutely.
And, we're not going to blame our mom for giving us milk. You see what I mean? Because she taught us to drink. No, I mean, we have to really examine our culture and the things that we're being told, you know what I mean? And really prioritize what's healthy.
And think about it before we join the bandwagon.
We've got several comments here. Sis Ray Lee says, yeah, but one may not be able to get a job with a national company. Can this issue be confronted legally due to the laws in the state of residence? Alan Rodney Waters says, I haven't smoked a joint in over 35 years. I don't think it's wrong and I don't judge, but I stay busy and I don't have time to be high. Personally, someone near and dear to me was a pothead and an underachiever in life. Not everyone can put it down or put it down long enough to move ahead. Pot and job are three-letter words and sometimes opposed. Peace. Who else? Ibina. Marijuana means Mary Jane, done name. USA pushed their laws globally, hence alternative hippie folk in Australia became the persecuted. Medical cannabis has just been allowed.
So can I just go back again? Just are you still got some more?
I'm trying to see.
Sorry, it's just this.
I need you to
Anslinger-
address
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
because
Go ahead.
what people don't really understand the trick that's been played on them. Once again, and we're seeing it again in the news. You can turn it on anytime we're being lied
Talk
to.
about
right?
how the
And
unproductiveness.
So really, what they did is they criminalized this plant and created a culture of criminalizing this plant, and then it became so profitable that they exported this culture. And Harry Anslinger, the first drug czar, stayed the drug czar for 30 years, exporting their prohibition culture all over the world as a way to control colored people. And so they would go to countries, Middle East, Africa, wherever, and they would say, oh, you're growing this cannabis for the last several hundred years? This is bad, and we're going to give you money to make this trade violent here so that we can control it.
Okay.
And so now we've bought into the reefer madness, people.
I mean, so-
yeah, please listen. You address it as
Imagine 30
Yeah.
years of exporting lies and propaganda, racist lies and propaganda to make money. Seriously, to make money, because this drug war thing, we can see how Western world has ran all over the world and creating all these wars and stuff. We have to start being honest about how we've been lied to.
So to address the reefer madness comment that was made, I've worked with some of the most prominent doctors, lawyers. I won't call their names, but they're some of the most hardened consumers of cannabis that you'll ever meet. Yes? Whether it be an attorney that's litigating your case, people, or a doctor who is operating on your brain today, he may have consumed a bowl of cannabis before doing so as to regulate his or her system. But because of the propaganda that's been going around, they won't tell you this. And so for me, to hear that someone may smoke a joint and they can't go to work, there's some other underlying
Obviously,
issues going on with that individual.
There's a cultural thing.
And so, you know, you wouldn't blame depression on the individual, right? And so again, we've got to be careful how we stigmatize and go along with the propaganda that's been slung at us, and then we internalize this hatred. You know, we see it all the time with black people not liking themselves, and with my being a dark-skinned woman, and you think, why is Judy changing the subject? Because it all intersects. Racism is racism, and it affects you and how you look at yourself and how you look at your neighbor and your fellow citizens. So again, we've got to break out of this sheep mentality and start to think for ourselves.
When we acknowledge that we've been lied to so ruthlessly, and anybody can turn on the TV or radio now and be really intimate with how we're being lied to so boldly.
Yes.
And, you know, for the folks that claim that they were looking out for us and had all these morals, we can see it's all worthless.
Lies.
It's just
Lies.
there's nothing there, right?
You can't even color it.
Everyone can see it now, right? And so
untruths.
we
just
have to
lies.
be able to say, when we're told, oh, this is bad or wrong, we have to look at those same people and say, wait a minute, you're the same person that was lying to us for 80 years.
Hello?
So what about now the marijuana shops that are coming into the neighborhood? What's going on with that?
Well, so now this is a whole new thing now. So now we're creating a licensed industry without really recognizing a lot of the stuff that we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to create a business, and we're going to try to ignore
all the harm,
all the wrong things that were done, and just forget about that. Let's just get into biz so that we can sell this and normalize things. It's kind of what no one wants to look back and analyze what happened.
So let me ask you this question, though. If I'm sitting here again listening to the show, my question would be, well, what good would that do me in terms of getting looking back to analyze it, and how is that going to improve my community when these outfits are moving in to sell the product to my people, a lot like liquor stores are doing? How we're going to change them, how we're going to change this process so that they don't become the liquor stores of the 20th century.
We were purposefully estranged from this entire body of knowledge to keep us from it. So we combat that by taking ownership and educating ourselves up so that we are now in control of how this thing goes, and we are not lied to and abused by the creation of this market, however they want to change it into. Folks have got to take ownership of these things, else they'll use them against you.
Well, but the thing is that we had a cannabis, an individual, an attorney here on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Everett.
And we talked about the law and how much it costs to get the license. And when she gave me the price, I was like, "Are you crazy? What people who in the black community are going to walk around with $30,000 that can actually give for this license?"
It's a lot of value.
Yeah. So my question is, how do we, as members of the community, get involved in the companies who are doing this so that we can be represented in the profits as well? You know, I understand the history. I concur with it. I have no rebuttal because I know you're accurate. All right. But now that, you know, it's legalized in Massachusetts, not at the federal level, but it's coming. I know it's coming. All right. So what do we do? You know, how do we behave in such a way that we can profit? That's one piece. And everything is political in America. We have to understand the importance of the political system and the surreptitious role it plays in manifesting any and everything in America. So what do we do around making sure that when these laws are crafted, that we're at the table, our representatives at the table? And I know the answer, you know, and I know you know the answer, you know, but I think people need to hear it's important. This is why it's important, and I'm going to give it to you. This is why it's important to come out and vote.
Yes.
This is the reason why it should be a part of your daily operation, is that I want to do this. I want to register, educate, and participate, rep. in the voting system. I want to make sure that when the policies, the regulatory policies are written, that they're written in such a way that our people are included.
Yeah,
This is why.
That's really what the work we can do now.
And before Chief goes into detail, I'd like to say that I was at the table, one of the few black persons were at the table with Mass Can. When the regulations were being crafted, and the language that was sent to Governor Baker's desk was not what came out. They changed the entire language of what the people wanted. I want folks to hear this. So when you hear that, they went behind closed doors and came out with their own version, it's true, it's facts. And so again, we the people seem not to have as much power as we think we do, because when the governor can go back, behind closed doors with his cronies and change what the people demanded, we have no power.
So let's talk about what we can do now, right? Because something else happened yesterday.
We have a caller.
Oh, fantastic! But let's talk about what happened yesterday as an example of basically how we can lean in and be more effective and benefit, and at the same time what's happening in this market. And so yesterday, the Cannabis Control Commission met and had a second in a series of talks about really what is the latest social equity push, which is creating licenses for delivery and social consumption. Both of these two license categories have been considered from the very beginning from the Cannabis Control Commission as license categories that were going to be more lower cost and available, providing opportunities for people from those harmed communities that were harmed from the drug war. And so these two license categories that have been pushed back year after year and haven't been put out, they finally have started to move forward to create draft regulations. And just yesterday, the one commissioner that has been advocating for these changes for many years, Shaleen Title, and actually the entire Cannabis Advisory Board were all ignored 4-1 yesterday by the other cannabis control commissioners. They're all appointed by different state agencies and officials, and they really have not been responsive to the cannabis consuming community. And so when we're talking about what we can do, we have to be proactive and create the cannabis market and economy that we want to see. And we have to educate ourselves to know what that looks like, and not be spoon-fed by whoever is claiming it should look like this, because it probably shouldn't.
We have a call. We have a call.
Go ahead, caller.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, good morning. I wanted to chime in and say the reality is that we know that the community of color and black people in particular will not have the proper resources. What if these companies that comes in and start these businesses is hit with a certain tax, that those funds can go to address the needs of the black community in particular, like a sort of a tax or say a linkage money, and as a substitute for whether it's entrepreneurship training, the betterment of education or whatever it is. What if they're hit with a certain tax and it goes directly to that particular group?
Yeah, you're right, T. Michael. Thanks for calling in. And I think
thank you. Great show. I will be listening.
Thanks a lot. And you're right. We have to tax this new industry. It should be part of what makes us whole, right? But it's not a one-time thing. We don't just say you have to pay this tax and it's over, right? This is an ongoing thing where we have to continue the pressure. And just telling companies to pay tax isn't enough, right? We have to create regulation, and then we have to enforce it, and we got to stay on them. And they're going to try to change it. And so it's an ongoing, regular thing. And when we back off from it, we lose.
Well, there are different ways to combat this. Number one, if you are able to grow your own, that's one of the best things that you can do. It's to start. If you don't know where else to start, grow your own, because you're able to do that under the law. Legally, you can grow your own within a certain number of plants. Number two, you can co-op with other persons who are growing, and then the number
we should be opening up these type of structures so that more people can participate more regularly. Cannabis was really petty trade, let's be honest.
Yes.
Petty trade in every single neighborhood that we've lived in. Our uncles and our people in our family were circulating this money, right, for the little petty trade weed that's coming to the neighborhood, and maybe they're buying milk money, maybe they're paying their gas, maybe they're paying their child support, it's supplementing whatever in that household, right? And now we're saying we're going to license this activity and we're going to move it to Main Street, and all of your activity with this thing needs to stop, despite the fact that we've just made it legal. And if you want to benefit from this now, you're going to have to come and apply yourself to our new model over here,
And
which
have
does take a lot
thousands
of
of
money and
dollars.
has a lot of restrictions. And I need people to really just kind of remember this one thing. As all this money that we talk about with licensed cannabis, people need to really remember, it's only valuable because of the miserable history of racism here in America. That's the only reason cannabis has all this monetary value. It's because of all the suffering,
Destruction.
all the people locked up in jail, all that money that's been circulated in the economy during this drug war. That's why cannabis is so valuable. The value has been pumped into it by restricting it and criminalizing people.
We have
And
another
so
caller.
All
Caller?
this money, we want to feel strongly about it. We need to recognize it's only because of racism.
Okay.
Caller, you on the air?
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Very well,
Wonderful.
thanks.
How are you?
Good. This may surprise some people, but I actually agree with about 90%
Oh, that's great.
of
Thanks.
what you folks are saying
What?
concerning marijuana.
We got him dropping his phone over here, folks.
This is Pastor Dan.
I know. I don't. I know. I just did not
Oh, this
hear
is Pastor
what.
Dan. Oh, thanks for calling. I like
Wow.
Pastor Dan. See, I watch Pastor Dan.
Oh my Lord!
Wow.
I know. Pastor, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm
Oh,
all right.
okay.
It's just, he's making sense, and I also know the history of what he's talking about. The fact that everything that you've talked about is accurate for the most part. The only things that I'm concerned about is now that it's been decriminalized, it still seems to be restricted in areas where it can be helpful. Clearly, we've all had the grandmother, we've all had the relative that has used, it was a joke, but it did help their it did help their health.
Absolutely.
So, but here's my question.
Yeah.
And it's not a backhanded question. How do we, obviously we
Thank
don't,
you for
do we
that.
want, yeah, no problem. We don't want people driving or do we want people driving under the influence?
So what we want to talk about safe adult consumption and what does a healthy cannabis lifestyle look like, right? And there's all different,
Okay, and that, there you go. Thank
right?
you.
And so there's all different. Thank you, Pastor Walker. And
Yes,
I like
thank
your
you.
show, Sound Travels. I do catch that. But we want to talk about what is healthy, right? And what is good. And so there's different types of cannabis consumption, right? Some people in their life may come to cannabis just for a temporary time in their lives. Maybe they're getting over something, they have some pain, whatever. They may just use it for 6 months to a year or 5 years, and then they no longer need cannabis. Other folks, it's a part of their regular life from, since they were a child until they die. All different types of cannabis consumption. People
Right.
have all different types of culture around it. Now, we want to
I know,
support
well,
responsible
people who-
cannabis use.
Go ahead. I know people who are company presidents and, managing multi-million-dollar organizations and smoke weed every morning.
Yes. I'm glad you said that. And I was about
Okay?
and I was about to get to that place where there's been this stigma to say that you can't function, you can't drive. But before the conversation came about legalization, people were already consuming and operating vehicles and, caring for their children and going about their lifestyles.
Taking opiates.
And,
Right.
Yes. And so
So-
I would prefer a mom handling a baby to smoke a joint than be on Prozac or Zoloft. And again, I'm a medical assistant. And so for me, there's no comparison between cannabis and those hard drugs.
And so we want even church folks, right, to take ownership of this, because we want this type of things to be in the hands of moral folks that care about the community.
Absolutely.
For too many years, it's been relegated to kind of a criminal thing, and so it maintains this stigma of this criminal thing. But if we have moral, good people saying we're going to be responsible and create a culture that allows for adult cannabis consumption that doesn't take away from us but adds to us,
Yes.
that's what
It's a beautiful
I'd
thing.
like to see. I think that's the most healthy thing, and it takes leaders in the community that are willing to challenge their own culture and create something better. Because that's what we're doing. We have to create a new culture.
If I may, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this. I'm still blown out of the water that Pastor Dan agrees with me, because we have had our healthy debates, our intellectual confrontations.
He calls it a healthy debate. I call it right. I call it $300 I had to pay the emergency ward.
but.
Yeah, don't sit close to him when you don't agree with me. I'm just letting you know.
Thanks for the warning.
But
I'm just letting you know.
Okay, Pastor. But I'm sitting back and I'm saying, if I'm an established drug pharmaceutical owner, okay, I'm established. I'm producing the Prozacs and all those things, and because I have the medical community prescribing my drugs. I have a house on the Hampton, and I have offices in the high rises in the various building cities around the country. Why would I want to see this competitor come on the marketplace that's going to seriously eat into my market?
Yeah, you're not going to want to see that, because it will replace some stuff in the medicine cabinet, right? And so what those pharmaceutical companies are doing is they're buying big fields so they can grow it themselves.
Or they're actually they're actually making inroads into influencing the minds of the establishment not to fully embrace the usage of this.
Absolutely, Dr. Bradley, and so I'm glad you brought that up.
That's what they're doing.
Yes, and because Go ahead, Pastor.
Let me say this, and then I'm going to get off and let you all go, because we're almost running out of time. Because you got 5 minutes before you're going to have to go into break.
You know myself better than I do, but go on.
So there's a couple parallels here. We know that the numbers game that was taken from the people of Harlem, and became one of the main. Exactly. Became the lottery, and many people don't even know what it was called before it became a lottery. They used to make fun of the N-word pool, So, but now when the government takes it over, now it's legitimized. Why? Because now they can tax it.
Yeah.
And
or alcohol.
Yes.
Pardon?
Alcohol is another parallel.
Yes.
Right. So the last part of this is: has there been any? Because law enforcement is now struggling, trying to find a standard by which they can tell if a person is impaired under the influence of cannabis. Has there been anybody in the industry? Has anybody in the industry stepped up to say, listen, this is how you can tell if somebody is impaired? Or is that going to remain a bit of a quagmire? Because right now, go ahead.
Let me first try to address what Dr. Bradley said, because I don't think there's a comparison, between how cannabis affects you and alcohol and all these other hard Zoloft and all these other things. And so prior to us discussing this legalization, folks, doctors, lawyers, and the like have always consumed cannabis. And it did not deter or add to any of the accidents that are on the road. Now, if you're going to legislate marijuana and cannabis and how it makes you feel and the effects from it, we should do the same with Zoloft and Percocet
and that's what
and Ambient and the rest.
I think
and
the
so
impairedness isn't really what they're saying it is.
And so again, we ought to not go down this slippery slope. As someone who has just lost a child, my trauma driving, which I stopped doing after I realized that I was a danger to myself and society, I stopped driving. Now, someone who is traumatized is more of a detriment on the road than someone who has had a cannabis joint. Now, when you combine cannabis with other drugs, we don't know what that is going to do to you. So we ought to talk about those things happening, rather than blaming it all on cannabis use.
Okay.
We're
coming to break.
Okay.
Reverend, I would appreciate you, but we're going to come to break, and we're going to ask them to stay, because we're going to continue this conversation in the next hour on the internet, but we're going to continue because it's very important. Okay. Be blessed.
I agree with you.
We thank you very much for the call.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for calling in.
All right, this is Denise. You gonna take this or?
I am.
Okay. So we're gonna have a conversation off the air, and I'm gonna ask you guys to stay a little longer, if you can, if your schedule permits, and then we're gonna talk about how we're gonna move forward. But Denise, you have it.
I got it. We'll be back.
All right. But